All right, welcome back to Roundtail Restoration, everybody. My name's Chris. This is my 1964 Triumph TR4, and as the song says, in the first time in forever, I'm going to actually attempt a repair. Thanks for watching. Unlike what you guys might think, I was going to start for the battery tray. I decided to take it a little bit easier. It's been a while since I've welded and had to do any of this stuff, so I want to go on something that's a little bit easier. So what you see here, this is right behind the driver's side door, and I can't remember what the name of this actual piece is, but you can see the brake here, and it goes up to here. Now you can buy these, but you know, why spend $100 when I can repair it? But then behind you have the inner fender as well, so there's a union of metal here. So I've got to clean all this up, cut out obviously the stuff that's nasty. I might have stuff on the inside part that I'm going to have to cut as well. So I'm going to have to cut up on here on the horizontal as well as the vertical. And I also have to worry about those holes getting lined up. But we'll go ahead and see if we can't get something figured out here. I know the lighting's not that great over here, but I told you I was going to get some sheet metal. So this is a 4x4 sheet of 18 gauge sheet metal. And then right over there, I've got another one. So obviously I've got enough sheet metal here to practically build the car. Like I mentioned, it was going to cost me just shy of $200. So it was like $189 with tax. So I think in the long run, it'll be worth it. I'll try to sell the other 4x4 sheet if I end up not using it. But it is cold rolled stuff, which is a little bit higher quality than the hot rolled stuff. One thing I will caution is it's sharp. All right, you got these corners here. This is a big piece. Anytime you get near this thing, or especially when you're going to handle it, you want to take some safety precautions. Definitely wear gloves. One of the sayings that you hear a lot, especially in the restoration thing that I've made myself several times, is ask me how I know. So again, watch out for the sharp corners, and let's get to it. Kind of a weird angle here, but you can see the seam there and see where the holes are as my hand flashing back and forth. But in that seam there's all sorts of rust and everything like that. So I'm afraid I'm going to find some chunkies in there. The back part of the inner fender looks good. So I think what I might do is cut a lot more than I would otherwise, and maybe take this whole seam off, repair the spot that's bad internal to this piece, and then weld it back in. I'm not quite sure yet. I'm sure there's all sorts of spot welds in here. But right now, I'm going to go ahead, get all the paint off, get as much of the rust off as I can, and then assess at that point. All right, got a paint removal disc here. We'll just go ahead and start going to town with that a little bit. Not real aggressive, obviously, just trying to take some surface stuff off, see if I can break through any holes, things like that. All right, so I picked up some more holes up here. So that's reinforces the point that I probably want to take this whole piece off up through here. Several spot welds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, probably something in here somewhere. So I'll have to pound all those out. All right, so like I said, I got holes right here, pitting all over the place, as you can see, and I've got a through pit all the way up to here. So there's a spot weld right there. So I'm probably gonna cut here and up a little bit, take all this piece out, all the way to about here. There's a seam right here from the inside that's probably spot welded in a couple spots. It looks pretty difficult to get to, so I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to break the metal there. But I'm going to go ahead now and drill these spot welds out that I can locate easily. Not going to be anywhere near as aggressive as I was with that chisel thing, like I did on the battery box. I'm going to, because I want to, protect some of this, and especially the back of it here, the inner fender. I want to protect that. So not much more gentle. Got this premium spot weld cutter kit from Blair. It's I've used this in the past. I used this on the Spitfire. What it's got is a drill bit that's center punched, and it's supposed to be spring loaded, and that kind of will hold your position. And then the outer bits cut the outer metal with a big hole, and it just makes it so you can get the spot welds out. Now, if you're trying to save the piece of metal on the outside, it doesn't work as well because the hole is really big. What it's designed to do is remove the spot weld and cut around it on the outside piece of metal, leaving the underside piece of metal completely intact, and then you would go around and shave off the actual spot weld from the inner side. So again, you're going to get a big hole on the outside of the spot weld around it on the outside piece of metal, and the idea is not to penetrate your inside piece of metal at all. and then you can go around with the chisel, like I had done, just a smaller one, like a wood chisel, and finish removing it. So I also use lubrication for this. Same guys, Bohr Roto-Broach stuff, and it's just a stick lubricant here to hopefully keep it a little bit nicer. You can just kind of dip the bit in there and pick some of that stuff up. Now you saw me center punch all these, so I'm just going to go ahead and go to town. All right, I got these spot welds most of the way gone. There's another one in here somewhere that I can't find yet. I'll figure that out when I get the chisel in here, but I'm going to go ahead and get the chisel and just slowly start to kind of pry that metal around and see if I can find where I need to cut more. All right, so again, I'm using a wood chisel here. The wood chisels have a much thinner profile than your metal chisels. And even though the metal can't hold up to smacking through this other metal and the spot welds, I'm not really trying to save and keep the tip sharp or anything, but I just find it's a little easier to control and a little less brutal, unlike that other one that I have. All right, so hopefully you can see the face of the chisel through there if I move my head and get out of the shadow. So I know that that's good down there. All right, so that one's done. You can kind of hear that pop, hopefully. Go to the next one. Yeah, you can hear that pop. See if I can find where this other, not there. I think my other spot weld looks to be right about in there. You won't be able to see it, but you can really see kind of a hard crease in there, so I'll come back over there. I don't think I've got these cut enough. Yep, I'll drill these more out. I got these two, and like I said, right about in here somewhere, I'll just kind of guess. Probably use a pit as my guide hole, and then get these out the rest of the way. And I'll come back and show you. All right, so believe it or not, I got all these spot welds out, and I got lucky right here with this one and nailed it the first time. So all of these are loose. I've got one left here. I'm not sure if I'm going to cut that out or not yet. And then this little seam here, and then obviously this whole piece of metal is whole. Before I remove any of this, however, I'm going to go ahead and make a template out of cardboard and try to get close to making a new piece to fit in here. One of the things that I learned both from experience and from watching a gentleman on YouTube, Fitzy's Fabrications. If you haven't checked out his channel, I'll put a link up. It's very entertaining, and not to sound like I'm busting on him, but primitive, just simple tools, tools he makes himself, and just a very clean and outstanding job with nothing all that fancy. But he usually will make templates before he cuts out old metal, or if he does, he doesn't do anything with it and holds on to it for reference. I'll go ahead and make this out of cardboard here real quick and try to get that fleshed out a little bit, and then try to transfer it over to my new piece of metal, and hopefully I'll be able to do that. All right, so that'll give me the basic outline and about the piece that I want to cut. One of the other things that I'd recommend, and that Fitzy does as well, is always cut bigger than what you've got here. It's obviously much easier to take metal away than it is to add it. So when I go ahead and I'll trace this template out on my piece of big metal, I'll trace around it enough and cut on the other side of the line, so I've got a 1/4 inch or so. But I'll go ahead and transfer this over to the sheet metal, get the sheet metal cut. So what I got here is a very rusty metal brake. The trick here is I cut my outline over here, but you got to bend it the right way so that you can actually, the template's set up like this, and I want it to bend like this, so this flare needs to be, you know, up at the top. Well, if I bend it like this, I'm going to make it go backwards. So you got to transfer your bend line over to the other side. And I just kind of followed the mark around here and just kind of slowly came around to the other side. So now that's lined up. And I also want to put the bend right in the middle of the line, because again, I'm going to try to get a little bit of a roll out of this. I don't know if it's going to work real well. I want to use the metal brake to at least get me most of the way there, and then use the, maybe put it in the vise or something to kind of try to give me my roll a little bit. I'm not positive that this is going to work. The other thing with this is you got to be really, the metal brake's got to really hold the piece of metal or it's going to move on you. And this, like I said, is just a little dinky metal brake, obviously, that I've got just clamped to the workbench here. So it's definitely not the best solution in the world. And it's one of these things that, you know, I'd like to make for myself one of these days. So I just got some C-clamps here. I'm going to go ahead and clamp the metal down and then bend it up. All right, so I'm going to grab both handles here and see what happens. And it doesn't look like it's even going to bend it. Yep, these clamps aren't strong enough to hold the thing to the board. All right, moved over to a different workbench with solid wood here that I could use some wood screws and get this thing in here. So I have a feeling that this might just rip the screws out of the wood, but we'll see. Okay. Looks like we're going to be okay. All right, so I'm not going to go full vertical with it. So we'll get this thing out, present it to the car. See how the angle looks. Actually, that roll is pretty good. I should be able to clean the rest of this up with the vise, and we'll see. So it's going to go on like that. Let's walk over there and see what happens. Got the donor piece fleshed out a little bit more here. Not far from perfect. It just needs some adjustment, for lack of a better way to put it. But it's close enough right now that I am confident to go ahead and cut off the piece of metal that I want to get rid of. So it looks like actually I even went a little too far with the angle, made it too close to 90 degrees, and it actually looks like it changes angle a little bit as it moves down. Damn you, Triumph. So I'll have to open up this angle out here, and this one's actually pretty close. I'm gonna go grab the hammer real quick and just see if I can use the car as a template itself and kind of just bang this open a little bit, see what happens. I'm gonna use a mallet here to do this because I don't want to destroy the rolled edge here. Oops. All right, I think that got me pretty far there. I'm going to go ahead and shorten this up a little bit more. I don't want to be so close to the seam here that I start having to worry about having to grind out the welds and everything in here. I'd much rather have a nice flatter spot. So I need to take a little bit of that off. But otherwise I'm good with this piece how it sits. I just take the Dremel, cut this piece out, and we'll see what's underneath. I'm not going to go this far out. I'm going to go actually on this side of the spot weld right there. But catch that little hole, if you can see that. I doubt you can, but catch that little hole. So I'll go right in between those two. Actually, I'll cut right here first so that I can start to lift this thing up a little bit and get it away and give me a little bit of relief from the underlying metal so I don't cut into that by accident. And then we'll just, we'll cut. So I'm using, like I said, a Dremel here, and I've got a Dremel reinforced, it's like with fiberglass fibers, cutting wheel in it. They make some heavy duty ones, and lately they've gotten a really bad rap. That they come apart and the little metal ferrule that's in here breaks apart and all that kind of stuff. So I decided to get about 20 of these things instead. So I don't expect them to last as long, but I don't expect them to fail, you know, catastrophically like the other ones seem to have. There's one down. All right, there you go. See the back side of it here is all nasty. But one thing I am happy with is that up here it's nice and smooth and there's still good paint on there. So I know that up underneath here that lip is solid and I can feel that it's relatively nice and smooth. This inner fender, except for that little spot right there, which you can't see because you're looking down on it, I'll come around and show you, actually looks like it's in pretty good shape. As far as being solid, it's rusty, but so I'll go ahead and take the grinding wheel to that, get that cleaned off, present the piece that I've got to this thing, and try to make this a little bit more of the same thing. All right, so happy with the looks of that. Even though you can see this is not in great shape from behind, all that rust is gone. So I don't intend to replace that. But what I am going to do is clean it up real good. I'll show you how I'm going to do that in a second. I do want to get all the little burrs and everything off of the piece that I cut here. I'll use the Dremel tool to do that. I'm not real crazy about my solution down here with just kind of leaving that lip, but hopefully I'll be able to weld that in okay. But yeah, I got to get these little burrs out of the corner so that it doesn't mess up my welding and get this all cleaned up. And then, like I said, I'll use a stone on my Dremel to do that. So obviously in the pits and everything, I still have quite a bit of rust and I want to neutralize that. So what I'm going to use is OSPO. There you go, OSPO. This stuff is not real cheap. I think this bottle is about 20 bucks. This is 32 ounces. But you guys know that I'm a big fan of Southern Polyurethane's paint, and this is the only stuff that they recommend using for rust neutralization and conversion. So that's why I'm biting the bullet a little bit and spending the extra money on it. The active ingredient with this stuff, hence the name Phospo, is phosphoric acid, and that essentially will convert the rust into something that's essentially inert iron phosphate instead of iron oxide. So that'll help mitigate it, and it'll get in the pits and everything that I won't be able to get into with a wire brush and things like that. So while I am working on the sheet metal, I wanted to go ahead and get this stuff treated. Now it is very, very, very thin. It works like water, so you don't need very much at all. And you just put it on with a paintbrush. So little container here, no real odor to it. Believe it or not, we use this stuff on the submarine to convert rust before we would paint stuff. I'm sure we weren't as careful as I'm going to be here with it, but we've been using this rust converter technology for forever. So you can see it's pretty thin. I'm trying to really work it in there so it sits in all those pits, especially since this is kind of a vertical panel here. All right, the concern with this stuff, however, is that if you put epoxy primer on top of it, it will not adhere very well at all unless you totally neutralize this stuff. There's a video out there for you. I'll try to find it for you and link if I did. It'll be in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. The guy took SPI epoxy primer and did a torture test with OSPO underneath of it. It's a really good video and it shows you how strong that SPI's epoxy primer is, as well as what happens if you don't neutralize OSPO properly. So back to that in a little bit. So I'll go ahead and grind that back a little bit. I'm still going to leave this length in here and then cut to fit once I get it in there. Check my OSPO behind here. And one more thing I need to do is I need to drill in the hole for the bolts for the fender. So I don't want to forget that, obviously. So we'll grind that out, mark the bolt from the back coming in from the inner fender well, get that drilled out with a step drill on the drill press, and I should be almost there. All right, that gap looks good to me. You can see, like I was mentioning, you could probably see that gap in there between the metal, just where the flange isn't flat. And as I bring it in and work it down, that should flex by itself. I might take the hammer and dolly a little bit to it just to kind of give me a little bit more reassurance, but otherwise I'm good. Got the repair part here. Got the little holes that you can see in there welded or punched in for my plug welds. The big hole there for the fender bolt. For the plug welds, I used this Nika, I can't remember how to say it. I did a review on it. Obviously a hand actuated punch. It's a little painful. And especially this 18 gauge is thicker than the 20 gauge on the Spitfire, so you can definitely notice the difference, but it worked. I'm going to paint the inside of it now with this weld through primer. I did wax and grease remover and 80 grit sanding scratch on it. I don't really care what it looks like on this side, but I do want the paint to adhere well. So we'll get that done and in preparation for welding it up. All right, so as you can see, there's still some rust color there. That's not what I want. Like I had said when I first got the car here, I was going to try to take a lot more time and a lot more patience with it and do it right. You know, whereas with the Spitfire, I may have overlooked this and just put primer on it. Not so with this guy. So I'm going to get a lot more aggressive on the wire reel here, try to dig a lot more of that stuff out, and then reapply the OSPO, and I'm going to let the OSPO sit overnight. It's pretty miserable down here. It's very humid. It says it's less effective the more humid it is, so it's going to be near zero effectiveness, I think, in this humidity. And then just come back tomorrow and try to get the piece welded in. That's in weld through primer, so that should be ready to go. But I'll have to prime this too, and then hopefully get this welded in. That looks a little bit better. Now we'll go ahead, get the OSPO in there, and then call it a day. Come back tomorrow. So again, I will make sure that I understand how to completely neutralize this stuff before I do any paint on it. Got a clean paintbrush here. Make sure to work it in. All right. Hopefully that'll do it. All right, we'll let that sit. Hopefully get over here first thing in the morning. Get some stuff welded in. All right, welcome back. It's Sunday, so the next day. So you can see it's much more black now. So what we need to do now is we need to reactivate the OSPO. I went on SPI's forum last night and looked it up. We need to reactivate the OSPO, and you do that by essentially getting it wet again with OSPO. Let that soak in for a couple minutes so that the OSPO gets in all the nooks and crannies of the pits, and then wash it down with water, hit it with water-based wax and grease remover, sand it up with about 80 grit sandpaper, and then you can apply your primer. Now that procedure specifically for epoxy primer, reading the directions on the OSPO bottle, it says you essentially can paint right now, but I'd rather follow the Southern Polyurethanes method just because I know that that works. So we're gonna go ahead and apply some of this OSPO in here. Again, just trying to reactivate it, the stuff that's dried up, so that we can rinse it off. The only way you can get it off without re-wetting it, at least according again to the SPI website, is to sandblast it, and that will get in all the little nooks and crannies and everything. Just hitting it with sandpaper, the sandpaper will not get into the nooks and crannies. All right, so we'll let that sit for a couple minutes. Come back, like I said, rinse it with water, wax and grease remover, and then hopefully hit it with some primer. All right, everything's all cleaned up, sanded down, wax and grease removed, all that kind of good stuff. I got to give the wax and grease remover about a half an hour or so for it to make sure it's completely dry everywhere before I put paint on it. Then I'll hit it with a coat or two of paint and then weld the thing in. Been a while since I welded. Hopefully it's like riding a bike. So again, I got my Hobart, trusty Hobart 140 here, Hobart handler. And according to the data table, for 18 gauge, so there's your 18 gauge, I'm using solid steel and gas. I should be at about a 2 on the amperage and about a 50 on the wire speed. So that's where I've got it set up. I'm kind of happy to be able to use a little bit thicker of a metal here. It's a little bit more forgiving, a little bit easier to weld. So letting that paint dry a little bit more and then we'll get to it. Unfortunately, there's no real easy way to put this piece in and get it attached for me, so I'm just going to have to kind of hold it and spot as I go along. I'm going to do the top first to keep that line aligned, and then I'll worry about the plug welds underneath. This is my more concern up here for you know, the outward appearance and all. Ground some paint off up here to get a good ground spot. It's obviously important, and yeah, so it's not fitting perfectly, but it should be good enough to go ahead and do it. So like I said, I'm just going to kind of hold it here and lift up, and so that it's level over here, and as I work my way out, I'm just going to kind of push down and let the metal flex a little bit for me. Hopefully it does that. If it doesn't, this could be over pretty quickly. All right, got that first tack in the corner there. That definitely wasn't that great. So now all I'm gonna do is kind of work my way down and lift the metal as I go. So I'll lift it up a little bit here, tack, lift it up again, tack, and just kind of move down. I'll be able to weld with my right hand now, so that'll make it a little bit easier as well. When you do this, you want to feel with your finger and make sure that you're flush, and you just allow the flex of the metal to kind of take care of you. All right, work smarter, not harder. Got a little clamp in there to help me kind of hold that. That'll make it better for me. I'm a little out of practice. All right, so I'm relatively happy with that. Unfortunately, it feels like it rose up a little bit down here. Flat here, feels okay there, so I'm gonna just cut this or grind this weld off here, which isn't very good anyway. None of my welds are that great. So I'll just grind this down and get that pushed down and get it reset here. Well, it's tacked in. I'm gonna leave it at that. I don't have a whole lot of time over here today, and I don't want to keep going and get ahead of myself and screw something up. So I'm gonna leave it at that. Still got those plug welds to do, but those will be relatively straightforward. But everything feels pretty flush. I do have a little bit of a problem here with the transition, so I'm gonna have to grind a little bit and figure that out. Obviously, I left it a little long as well, so I've got to take care of that lip. But it should work, and then it'll, you know. Body filler's your friend. So next time I'm out here, I'll finish this up and get it looking as pretty as I can get it. But that's all I've got for today. So thanks again for watching, commenting, and subscribing. You guys have been great lately, especially keeping the subscribers up, and you keep watching. So I really appreciate that. Have a good rest of your day. Cheers.